Photosynthesis and Respiration Part 2. In this video, the goal is to continue with the work we've been doing on chemical reactions, and in particular, focus on photosynthesis and respiration. So last lesson, and in the previous video, we were looking at the 3 learning goals shown on the screen. Today, we will continue with those 3 learning goals because it is an extension of this work. So if we scroll down to where we left off, we stopped it at question 15, which is right about with the polar bears. So, starting off with question 16, which of the following would require at least some of your body's cells to respire? Keeping in mind respiration, as a quick overview, respiration is the process of your body converting oxygen to carbon dioxide. So, with what we know about respiration, go ahead and select the options. Remember, sometimes there are more than one correct answers to which of these following actions require your body to respire. Moving on to question 17. What is the relationship between respiration and breathing? So last lesson we looked at the misconception that many people misunderstood that respiration was breathing, when in actual fact, respiration and breathing are both chemical reactions, but they are viewed slightly differently. But the main relationship between respiration and breathing is, out of these 4 options, is D. That breathing makes respiration possible by supplying oxygen from our surroundings in the air and getting rid of the carbon dioxide that our body produces. With question 18, you are supplied with a diagram. So the diagram below summarizes the energy transfers in photosynthesis and respiration. Drag the missing terms to label it. So here, if we were to essentially split this right down this middle, what we could see is we have an endothermic reaction on the left-hand side, because we should now be aware that a photosynthesis reaction is an endothermic reaction. And on the right-hand side here, we have respiration, and respiration is an exothermic reaction. So given that we've got our endo and exothermic reactions, they would go up the top into these spaces above. Now, the process of photosynthesis itself, what we are looking for in these 2 spaces is, what do we start with? So what are your reactants? After the reaction occurs, what are your products? So what do you end up with? And given your options for photosynthesis, and knowing that respiration is the opposite, so the reaction for respiration can be seen as the opposite reaction of photosynthesis, whatever options you've chosen for these 2, you would then reverse for your respiration reaction. For question 19 here, respiration always releases some energy as heat. So when you exercise, the respiration in your muscle cells make you hot. We often describe exercise as burning energy, but is respiration a type of combustion? Make up your mind and give reasons for your response. One thing to remember is the general form of combustion reactions from the first lesson is a fuel plus oxygen gives you other products plus energy. Hopefully with question 19, you start to consider, okay, what do I know about combustion reactions? Well, I know that combustion requires a fuel, and it needs to interact with oxygen. And as such, those products that are formed give us the products and energy itself. So the products in this case, in any case of combustion, is actually carbon dioxide and water. So you might be thinking that it is counterintuitive, considering we associate combustion and burning with fire, and we obviously don't go up in flames when we exercise. But the difference is that respiration takes place within the cells in a controlled manner, and the energy is actually used by the cells rather than feeding further combustion. As in the case where with burning, we have fuels such as wood. So the difference there is one requires more energy to fuel it, whereas the other provides us with energy. Now, did you know? For a long time, scientists thought that all life on Earth depends on sunlight and oxygen, before they discovered complex ecosystems around volcanic vents deep in the ocean floor. The producers here are bacteria, which use the chemical energy in chemicals released from the vents. Consumers then feed on the bacteria, causing complex food webs that include mussels, anemones, crabs, shrimps, and tube worms. On the left-hand side here, what we can see is a colony of tube worms and anemone near a volcanic vent on the seafloor, located near the Galapagos Islands. So, the effects on the atmosphere. The early Earth was a harsh place to live, with frequent volcanic eruptions and an atmosphere dominated by carbon dioxide. There was no oxygen in the air. Then, about 2.3 billion years ago, cyanobacteria in the ocean developed the ability to photosynthesize. There was plenty of carbon dioxide, so the cyanobacteria thrived, reducing the carbon dioxide and producing enough oxygen to dramatically change the composition of the atmosphere. This is known as the Great Oxygenation Event. So the word oxygenation here means the process of adding oxygen. And so if we break it down, the Great Oxygenation Event is the great event that oxygenized everywhere in the atmosphere. The Great Oxygenation Event wasn't so great for most of the organisms at the time. The oxygen was poisonous to them and they went extinct. However, this eventually led to much greater diversity of life because oxygen-fueled respiration provides far more energy than any other types. Based off what we have just read there, question 20 here asks, what caused the Great Oxygenation Event, in which oxygen became a component of Earth's atmosphere for the first time? So, given the four options that we have here, plus this first paragraph, it tells us right in the middle, about 2.3 billion years ago, cyanobacteria in the ocean developed the ability to photosynthesize. That one line I've just read out relates directly to one of these four options. Pause this video and go ahead and select which one you think that relates to. Question 21. On balance, plants add oxygen to the atmosphere. What does this tell you about their relative amounts of photosynthesis and respiration? So, given that the Earth started with enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and there was no oxygen in the air, to what we have today, where our atmosphere is full of oxygen, would you consider that the photosynthesis, that plants photosynthesize yet don't respire? That photosynthesis outweighs respiration? that respiration outweighs photosynthesis, or that photosynthesis and respiration are perfectly balanced. If you choose this last response, that would mean the amount of oxygen in the air is equal to the amount of carbon dioxide. Now have a think about that, whether you think that is true or not, given what we know about our atmosphere and what we are able to currently breathe in. Moving on to question 22. Carbon dioxide now makes up just 0.04% of the atmosphere. The plants and other photosynthesizers use this to live. If they are absorbing carbon dioxide all the time, why hasn't the level in the atmosphere dropped to 0 as opposed to the 0.04? What this should now prompt you to consider is that the decrease in the carbon dioxide level is due to the photosynthesis of these plants. However, this actually needs to be balanced by other processes that add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So respiration by both plants and animals, for example, returns carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, and so does our industrial combustion. For example, you've got big energy plants, human burning of forests for natural forest fires, and definitely the burning of our fossil fuels. With question 26, this one here looks at the atmosphere of Mars. So Mars's atmosphere is similar to the early Earth's, with 95% carbon dioxide, 3% nitrogen, and virtually no oxygen. What this then tells us, based off this information, what can we imply? Do we know that there is definitely no life on Mars? Do we know if there is life on Mars, but it probably can't photosynthesize? Keeping in mind how much carbon dioxide and oxygen there is on Mars. If there is life on Mars, it probably doesn't need oxygen to respire. Once again, look at the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And lastly, there is definitely life on Mars. So we've got two extremes. The first one, definitely no life, and the bottom one, definitely life. So think back to the question. Look at which of your answers are a bit ridiculous, so you can rule them out, and you might be left with a few options that could work in terms of what is being implied about Mars. So remember, with all of these multiple choice questions, there can be more than one answer. Moving on to question 24. The atmosphere is a storehouse for most of the reactants and products of photosynthesis, respiration, and combustion. Label the diagram below to show how gases are exchanged between living things, combustion reactions, and the atmosphere, keeping organisms alive, fires burning, and the proportion of gases in the atmosphere steady. So, one thing to remember, although in the last century fossil fuel combustion has definitely increased the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So, we have 4 options on the side here: photosynthesis, combustion, respiration, and respiration. Now, as a plant, we know it can photosynthesize. So remember, look at what is being reacted and what is being produced. So what do you start with? What do you end with? These two here, this top option and this bottom option here, are very easily confused. So looking at the pathway of this reaction, whether you are starting with carbon dioxide and ending with oxygen, or starting with oxygen and ending with carbon dioxide, dictates whether the top option is going to be photosynthesis or respiration, and the bottom whether it is photosynthesis or respiration. Now, as humans, on this left-hand side here, we know that because we are not a plant, that we cannot photosynthesize, but we can convert oxygen to carbon dioxide. So the name of this process, you would just pop into this box. And this fire down this bottom right side, we are adding oxygen to our fire to produce carbon dioxide. So drag the option here that represents this chemical reaction. Now, for the revision. What we're looking at here with question 25. Which statement best sums up the way energy is transformed in the photosynthesis reaction? So if you do get a bit stuck, I suggest scrolling up to the top. But based off your knowledge of photosynthesis, please select the most appropriate response. Now pause this video. You can scroll up to the top for photosynthesis notes and select your option. Question 26. In photosynthesis, the products have something chemical energy than the reactants. So the reaction is something. So this particular question 26 relates to your energy diagram on the side, on this top side here. Once again, if you do get stuck, I recommend pausing this video, going back into the endothermic and exothermic activities, or at least watching the endothermic and exothermic tutorial video to get a better understanding and a bit of a review of these energy diagrams. So you would select your most appropriate option for question 26. Question 27. Respiration provides living cells with the energy for essential life processes by releasing the chemical energy of A, B, C, or D. Remember, we're talking about respiration. We're talking about the release of energy. So I suggest reviewing respiration and see what are your products, what is being produced. With question 28, in most living things, respiration requires oxygen. What is the relationship between this type of respiration and photosynthesis? Now, looking at your 4 options and scrolling up if you need to revise respiration and photosynthesis, there is an answer here that summarizes the relationship very nicely. And you would go ahead and select the most appropriate answer or answers. Question 29. Wolves respire, which release energy for their life processes. The ultimate source of this energy, so thinking back, where do these wolves get their energy from? So the very, very beginning of the energy source for these wolves, where would it be? And then you would select the most appropriate answer. With question 30, which of the following statements about the Great Oxygenation Event are true? Cyanobacteria in the oceans used up most of the oxygen in the atmosphere for photosynthesis. Cyanobacteria in the oceans produced a large amount of oxygen as the product of a chemical reaction. Before the event, no organisms were capable of photosynthesis. Or the proportion of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increased. So a quick refresher about the Great Oxygenation Event for question 30. Our answer was supplied to us in this paragraph here. So pause this video, have another read through it, and then come back down here and select your most appropriate answer or answers. With question 31, you are asked to write the word equation for photosynthesis, including where energy lies in this equation. And secondly, what is the source of energy in this equation? So where does this energy come from in the equation that you've just typed up? So in the equation that you're writing up, copy this arrow, so just highlight it and just copy it, and then just paste it into the written component. With question 32, why do all organisms need to carry out respiration? One thing that you will need to consider is the term glucose. So I suggest scrolling up to the top where it starts talking about respiration and the importance of respiration, and finding that connection to glucose in your response here. And lastly, with question 33, when the Earth was first formed, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. Briefly explain how the atmosphere changed so that today our atmosphere contains approximately 21% oxygen. So once again with question 33, take a look at this paragraph here to assist with your response, but please don't just rely on what is here with your response. So adding more detail to your written responses will provide you with a comprehensive list of notes that you can refer to in the future. So now that you've completed this photosynthesis and respiration activity, please, down the bottom here, you should see a blue button on your screen that says, "I'm finished, show my teacher." So please make sure you click that and start revising the work on exothermic and endothermic reactions, combustion, types of reactions part A and part B, plus this photosynthesis and respirations activity for a quiz on Friday when you return for your first face-to-face lesson. Thank you.